This is the final project paper presentation, a Sarah Plain and Tall novel study by Chelsea Masterson. A little bit about the book. Sarah Plain and Tall is the story of a family living on the prairie at the turn of the 19th century. The father, Papa, the two children, Anna and Caleb, do not have a mother, and so Papa, Jacob, writes a letter to Sarah Elizabeth Wheaton after he puts an ad in the paper asking for a wife. So a little bit about my students. I have 4 fourth grade students who are 9 to 10 years old. I have 3 male students and 1 female student. I teach resource level classes. Among my students are the following disabilities. I have discrepant cognitive functioning and developmental delays, ADHD, specific learning disabilities in the area of reading fluency and comprehension, speech and language disabilities, generalized anxiety disorder, fine motor delays, as well as auditory processing disorder. Listed here are the Common Core standards. We cover key ideas, details, fluency, types of texts and purposes, research to build and present knowledge, production and distribution of writing, comprehension and collaboration, presentation of knowledge and ideas, and vocabulary acquisition and use. Some learning objectives. Listed are the learning objectives for the unit. There are some general learning objectives, as well as each job within a literature circle has its own objectives. So students will be able to participate and collaborate in literature circle groups of 3 to 5 students. They'll be able to complete the assigned chapter reading and respond to questions or group discussion conversations with relevant and focused questions. The discussion director will be able to create relevant and focused questions on the assigned reading. The connector will be able to make text to world, text to text, and text to self connections. The illustrator will be able to create an illustration depicting their understanding of the text. The literary luminary will be able to identify and summarize important ideas or events from the text. Travel tracer will be able to summarize the movements of the characters or the changing of the setting. And the vocabulary enricher will be able to explore the text to identify and define and discuss unfamiliar words. I decided to use the conditions of learning theory, and the stages are gaining attention, informing students of the objectives, stimulating recall of prior knowledge, presenting the content, providing learning guidance, eliciting performance or practice, providing feedback, assessing performance, and then enhancing retention. Now I will go over an overview of each day in the unit. There are 10 days total. The parentheses you see at the end of each bullet point are the conditions of learning theory stage that bullet point addresses. Day 1, show the cover of the book, as seen here, to the students and ask them how your life may be the same or different than people during pioneer times. I will present a guiding question on Chapter 1. Why do you think Caleb asks Anna about their mother so often? Then I will ask students what they recall about learning about prairie life or pioneer life from their 3rd grade social studies class. I know that this is something that they learned in the past. Then we will review the Chapter 1 vocabulary PowerPoint. As seen here, there are screenshots of that. Students will also receive copies of the vocabulary slides as a handout. Students will then read Chapter 1 of the book Sarah Plain and Tall, which will be differentiated to meet their needs. Teacher will then model literature circle jobs. I've created a digital version of this where students are to fill out a Google form instead of a paper-based worksheet. Students are then to complete their literature circle job as homework. Day 2 is a literature circle discussion day. Students will be asked to recall what they remember from their Chapter 1 reading. Then they will present their literature circle job and participate in group discussions on Chapter 1 of the text. At the end, students will summarize the Chapter 1 verbally and make predictions orally on what may happen next. Finally, they'll complete a self-assessment on their literature circle. They will have to mark how they thought their literature circle went and why. Then they will have to share which literature circle job they tried and liked best and why. Then for their next group discussion, what would they like to improve on? They're going to either circle one of the choices provided or write what they would like to improve on in the other box. This is all about working together collaboratively as a team. Day 3 is a reading and vocabulary day. They will be provided with a guiding question. Why does Sarah tell the children about Maine, and why do you think she includes these details? Students will be asked to recall their Chapter 1 reading. Then they will be shown the vocabulary slides for Chapters 2 and 3 as seen here. Students will also receive these slides as a handout. Then there will be a differentiated reading of Chapter 2 and 3. As seen in these pictures, they can either read independently, read with an audiobook, or buddy read with a partner. While students are reading, the teacher will conference with each student and provide them feedback on Chapter 1's literature circle job while they're reading Chapters 2 and 3. And then the literature circle job for Chapter 2 and 3 will be assigned and completed for homework. Teacher will also provide a score for their literature circle job that they had previously completed while conferencing with them. Day 4, they will have another discussion day. This time, they'll recall Chapter 2 and 3, have a discussion on Chapter 2 and 3, summarize it verbally, and then make predictions and complete their self-assessment. Day 5 is a reading and vocabulary day. Guiding question for Chapters 4 and 5, why does Sarah bring Caleb and Anna gifts from the sea? Recalling Chapter 2 and 3. Vocabulary slides for Chapters 4 and 5 as seen here, which they will also receive as a handout. Literature circle jobs will be completed as homework. While the students are reading Chapters 4 and 5, the teacher will provide feedback on the literature circle job from Chapters 2 and 3 and provide a score for that. Next is Day 6. They're going to be asked to recall what they remember from Chapter 4 and 5. They'll present their literature circle job for Chapter 4 and 5 and participate in that class discussion. They will summarize Chapter 4 and 5 verbally and make predictions. Then they will complete their self-assessment again. Chapter 7 is a reading and vocabulary day. Guiding question for Chapters 6 and 7. Why is Maggie so nice to Sarah, bringing her gifts and offering to teach her how to drive a wagon? Students will recall from Chapter 4 and 5. Then will be presented with the vocabulary for Chapters 6 and 7 on the following slides. Students will receive that as a handout. Then there will be a differentiated reading of Chapters 6 and 7. While students are reading, the teacher will provide feedback on the literature circle jobs for Chapter 4 and 5. And then Chapter 6 and 7 literature circle job will be completed as homework, and a score for the Chapter 4 and 5 literature circle job will be also provided when they are conferencing with the teacher. Another note about literature circles, each student completes a different literature circle job each time. You may not repeat the same job. That way it is rotating and everyone gets to experience each job. Day 8 is the literature circle discussion day. They'll recall Chapters 6 and 7, participate in their literature circle for those chapters, and present their jobs. Then they'll summarize Chapter 6 and 7 verbally, make predictions on the next chapters, and complete their self-assessment. Day 9 is a reading and vocabulary day. The guiding question for Chapters 8 and 9, which are the final chapters of the book, are why are the children worried about Sarah going to town alone? What will Anna remember about her mother in this chapter? They'll recall Chapters 6 and 7. They'll be presented with the slides of the vocabulary terms for Chapters 8 and 9 as seen here. Students will also receive that as a handout. While students are completing their differentiated reading of Chapters 8 and 9, the teacher will meet with each student one-on-one to provide feedback on their Chapter 6 and 7 literature circle job and provide a score. The Chapters 8, and 9 literature circle job will be completed as homework. Day 10 is the literature circle discussion day. They'll be asked to recall what they remember from reading chapters 8 and 9. They'll present their literature circle job and participate in their class discussion on chapter 8 and 9. They'll summarize the chapters verbally. Then they're going to make predictions orally on what might happen next in the book series. The next book in the series is called Skylark. They will also complete their self-assessment. Since this is a resource level class, some of the differentiation options for this unit are to provide a digital version of the Literature Circles packet as I have done. You will see examples of those in just a moment. This allows for students who have fine motor delays to use voice-to-text software. Then next, there's the differentiation of the reading of the novel, including independent reading, buddy reading, and audiobook reading. And then none of my students have used this year, but could, if need be, for those students who have visual concerns or need a larger text. We have a scanner at my school where we can scan a text and it automatically enlarges it for a student with visual challenges. So as seen here, this is an example of one of the PowerPoints turned into a handout. This is chapter 1. There are 3 slides on each page, and then there are lines towards the bottom where students could take notes on each vocabulary word as needed. So here are my student artifacts. I created some examples, as well as I included some from students of mine that have completed each job. The connector, there's a description at the top of the job. Then they're to enter their name, the assigned reading. There are some directions and some examples. And then they're to enter their assigned thoughts, their text connections into each section here. Then for discussion director, once again, there's a description of the job. Then they're to enter their name and chapter and enter their 5 discussion questions that they created. They do not have to answer the questions, just create them. Students also have completed this on the Google form, like I said, I think I said earlier, and so they do not have to write. They just either type or use the voice command. The next job is an illustrator, so they're to create a picture. So for this one, students are to enter their name and the assigned reading, and then they're just going to mark which way they want to create an illustration, whether it's a drawing or a video or a collage or a diagram or a sculpture. So they just submit that and then bring whatever illustration they created to class with them the next day. Next, I have a travel tracer, so they enter their name and their assigned reading. Then they're either going to create an action map, which is a drawing map of the how the setting changes or the characters change, or if they prefer writing, they could write out how their setting or characters move throughout the text assigned reading. The last one is the vocabulary enricher. This is one that a student did complete for me. This was on chapter 3 of Sarah Plain and Tall. We have 4 vocabulary words. They're defined, and the page numbers are included for that. Next, we have our online digital content. I provided the link, as seen here, to the Google Doc that was created, as well as screenshots of the different components. I did include links to all of my sample products because they are Google Forms, so I did create links for those. I did create links for all of the Google Slides for all the vocabulary. Students are also going to be given a paper copy of that, but if they wanted to digitally access it, they could through these links. Then for additional resources, the Scholastic website to find a little bit more about Patricia McLaughlin, the author, or Sarah Plain and Tall was also created into a movie. I included, the IMDb website on the Sarah Plain and Tall movie. For conceptual organization that was talking about the SAMR model, there are examples of augmentation and modification within this unit that I did create. So for the SAMR model, for augmentation, I said that I believe that there are elements of both augmentation and modification present in my unit. Augmentation is enhancing student learning, and I believe that the digital format does indeed enhance that for my students because they're able to complete the same task, but the functionality is really increased for my students because, like I said earlier, students who have fine motor challenges are able to use that voice to text software in this digital format. The next thing which is really helpful is my students have ADHD, and so they have challenges with executive functioning skills. So since they are challenged that way, the digital format allows for increased functionality because students are not able to really forget or lose their homework, which means they're able to participate in the class discussion. With the paper-based copy, if they did not bring their assignment with them, they forgot it at home, etc., then they aren't able to participate fully in that class discussion the following day. So therefore, this increases the functionality of the assignment as well. There are modification examples as well. With it being a Google form, as a teacher, you can set it up where you are emailed as soon as a student submits one of their assignments. So what you can do is provide them feedback right away that night or that afternoon while they're doing their homework. You can email them feedback right away and say, hey, I noticed you missed a question, or maybe there's corrections that they need to make, or they weren't quite on target. So therefore, we are able to provide that feedback much more quickly, and therefore it's a transformation of the student's learning because I don't have to wait until the next school day to see how well my students did, and they're able to make corrections much more quickly back and forth. So that's a much more transformative experience to improve student learning with the feedback. Next, the summative evaluation. I created both a reflection page as noted here and you saw earlier, as well as a rubric to assess each student's job. So I will be able to reply to them in real time with suggestions for improvement. They're given the opportunity to make corrections and changes to their literature circle job and then submit it again that evening. So they can make those corrections, and it can be done back and forth as many times as needed. And the goal of providing the feedback in real time is to allow students to make changes so their group discussion can go much more smoothly. Students also have that opportunity to complete that self-assessment after each group discussion day to express how their group discussion went and why they feel that way. They also have the opportunity to share which literature circle job had been their favorite and why, and then areas where they can choose to improve on. Then for informal assessment, I will interact with students during their literature circles discussion. I will act as a mediator as well to encourage students to use their class time wisely and to ensure a balanced discussion that all students get a chance to use their voice. And I'll also provide redirection as needed to help students stay focused on task. So that was kind of some informal things. As well as formal assessment, I will be able to use a rubric as seen here to evaluate both the final copy of the literature circle job submitted as well as a student's participation in the literature circle to provide them with that feedback. So this is part of how they will be scored, and we will go over when we conference with each student. Lastly, here are the resources that I used. There are two websites plus our textbook. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation of Sarah Plain and Tall.